Michigan was a financial disaster and had the highest water rates in the nation. And it has some of the poorest water. In spring of 2013, Emergency Manager Ed Kurtz approved a plan that was going to change the trajectory of the water. In a 7-to-1 vote, the City Council also voted to support this, although they did not have the authority to execute that. They were going to move from Detroit Water to the Karen Gandhi Water Authority. There was a roughly $200 million bill for cheaper water and associated jobs that would come along with it. The Detroit Water canceled the contract a few days later, so Flint had a year to find another source of water, so they went with the Flint water source. In April of 2014, a switch is made and the problems begin. Bacteria, TTHM issues, Legionella, lead in the water. These are all some of the things that happen. Keep in mind, there is no acceptable level, no acceptable level of lead in any water. But these are when the problems started. Leanne Walters, who's here in the audience today, we appreciate the brave nature in which you have stepped forward. She's just a citizen. She isn't a water expert, but she stepped forward. She did the difficult thing. And somehow, some way, she found the fortitude to get a hold of the EPA in February of 2015, where Miguel Del Toro at the EPA came out to Michigan and actually started doing some testing. By June of 2015, a report was finalized. That report was then leaked, if you will. It was put out there. We have with us the mayor at the time, Mayor Walling. You look at his resume, Mayor Walling's a smart person. He's well educated. He's been very ingrained in the community. And he went out on television. I want to show a clip from that television because there's a reason why he actually went on television. But I want to show that clip now.
Okay, so we are here on the set, Mayor, back on the set. Are you ready to drink it?
Yeah,
okay.
My family and I drink the water every day, so. It's your standard tap water. You taste a little bit of the chlorine. All of our tests ever since this year have been comparable with what we used to get out of Detroit. Now, last year was different. The chlorine level was elevated. There were the TTHMs, which is actually colorless, but it's a concern. But those issues have been put behind us, and now I think it's more a matter of the perception.
So it is safe to drink, and you drink it every day. Your family uses it every day, you say, and also just a little taste. You said a little different taste, or?
Well, now it tastes very similar to any other tap water. It's got a little bit of a chlorine taste. I mean, look, anyone who gets used to drinking bottled water that's purified or distilled, that's going to be different than what you get out of a municipal tap. But we're testing it regularly. All of those tests are available online. So we want people to know exactly where the water stands, and we're continuing to improve it with the new carbon filter going in next week. It's just going to continue to get more dependable and more secure.
That was July 8th of 2015. The report was finalized by Miguel Del Toro in June. I think we're going to hear testimony that Ms. Hedman and the EPA communicated to the mayor that it was safe to drink the water. And that message was then conveyed to the citizens. And it wasn't until January of this year that the EPA actually took some definitive action. Now, it's not to say that the EPA is the only one at fault. The Department of Environmental Quality at the state of Michigan is also at fault here. But if the EPA or the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality would have taken action in the summer of 2015, when the EPA Region 5 Regulations Manager, Miguel Del Toro, wrote the memo to his superiors warning of the dangerously high levels of lead in the drinking water, perhaps none of this would have happened. What's sickening about this is it was totally avoidable. The former head of Region 5, Ms. Susan Hedman, who is with us today, dismissed and downplayed this memo, calling it, quote, a preliminary draft, end quote, and asserting, quote, it would be premature to draw any conclusions, end quote. So the residents of Flint continue to drink the water, poisoning them and their families. The next opportunity for EPA to take action came from outcries for help from city officials. Congressman Dan Kildee was also very engaged in this. It reached a fevered pitch in September of 2015, and still no action was taken. In fall of 2015, local Flint residents filed an emergency petition with the EPA. Ms. Hedman continued to dismiss the problem and claimed the EPA was monitoring the situation. In December of 2015, the city of Flint declared a state of emergency. A month later, Governor Snyder declared a state of emergency for Flint, activated the state's Emergency Operations Center, and requested a federal declaration of disaster. Finally, on January 21st, 2016, nearly 7 months after Miguel del Toro's memo, the EPA issued an emergency administrative order citing, quote, imminent and substantial endangerment exists, end quote, with regard to the high levels of lead in the Flint water supply. But how many more people were poisoned in those 7 months? How many illnesses were worsened in those 7 months? On that same day that emergency order went out, that same day Ms. Hedman rightfully resigned. But her resignation doesn't heal the sick and ease the suffering of the residents of Flint. And what concerns me, we'll deal with on Thursday, is the action of resigning by Ms. Hedman was characterized by the EPA administrator as courageous. That was courage, according to the administrator. But we'll, like I said, deal with that on Thursday. What happened in Flint can never happen again. And it's almost unbelievable how many bad decisions are made. Government at every level, local, state, and federal, made poor decisions. And our role in a committee is to ensure federal agencies and employees do their job. According to the EPA's website, its mission is to protect human health and the environment. End quote. They failed at every single level. Instead, the EPA seems to be working on other things, other priorities. I'm going to enter some things into the record, and this is going to make some people uncomfortable. There have been a lot of accusations about, was this driven by race? Was this driven by the fact that this was a poor city? Is this because they're underserved? There are a lot of accusations out here. This is an internal memo, and before you put it up, I want you to understand who this is going back and forth with. This is Jennifer Crooks, EPA Michigan Program Manager, Region 5. Debbie Baltazar, EPA Region 5 Branch Manager. Timothy Henry, EPA Region 5 Associate Director of the Water Division. And Steve Marquardt, I don't know how to pronounce his name, EPA Environmental Engineer. This is an internal memo. Go ahead and put it up. September 24th. Perhaps she already knows all this, but I'm not so sure Flint is the community we want to go out on a limb for. Are you kidding me? The EPA administrator says that Susan Hedman was courageous for resigning. It didn't take us but a couple hours once we got these memos to find the problem here. You can take down that. Why isn't Flint the community they go to? You know, of all the communities out there, the one that's having the toughest time is the one that needs the most protection. And you can shake your head and say, oh yeah, but the EPA had every opportunity to make the right move here, and they didn't. And the Department of Environmental Quality, don't think you get off the hook either. Because one of the things that is fundamentally and totally wrong here is they had the information and they would not release it to the public. The Congress now, at least the House, has passed a piece of legislation saying when you have this information, you have to release it within hours. That's just common sense. It shouldn't take an act of Congress to tell the EPA that they need to make this information public. We're going to have good, vibrant hearings today. So I would ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record. Without objection, so ordered. I also would like to enter into the record a Darnell Early directive, an order number 15, dated June 20th, 2014, turning over to Mayor Walling from Darnell Early, the emergency manager at the time, the day-to-day operations for the Department of Planning and Development and the Department of Public Works, without Without objection, so ordered. Another email from, an email from Miguel del Toro. This is correspondence back and forth, dated July 8th, 2015. You know, one of the concerns is you got a Miguel del Toro, pretty much on the line, right? He's right there on the front lines. One of the things I've heard that's probably the most disturbing is that he felt like he was retaliated against. In fact, we had a hearing last year about the actions of Susan Hedman in Region 5 and the retaliation. 3 whistleblowers coming up talking about retaliation efforts. And here you have Miguel del Toro on July 8th, finally gets fed up. One of the things he said is, "It almost sounds like I'm stuck in a corner holding up a potted plant because of Flint. One misstep in 27 plus years here and people lose their minds." This is a guy who wasn't allowed to travel. He suddenly had to go to ethics training. He had to do all these other things. That's how Region 5 and the EPA was operating. This guy should be put up as getting a raise. You want to give a bonus to somebody? Give it to Miguel del Toro. He was doing the right thing. Instead, he's being reprimanded. And I'd ask that this be entered into the record as well, without objection, so ordered. On July 15th, 2015, I'll enter into this also into the record, without objection, so ordered. And then finally, Miguel del Toro gets fed up on September 22nd of 2015. This is how he starts the email. "This is no surprise. Lead lines plus no treatment equals high lead in water equals lead poisoning children." This is how it starts in September. And the EPA didn't do anything until January. I don't understand that. This is the kind of thing that has to immediately get out into the public. Immediately. Let me read another paragraph from this email. "At every stage of this process, it seems we spend more time trying to maintain state-local relationships than we do trying to protect the children. I said this from the very beginning, and I will say it again. You don't have to drop a bowling ball off of every building in every city to prove that gravity and science will work the same way everywhere. It's basic chemistry." And then November, I ask unanimous consent to enter that into the record without objection, so ordered. And I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an EPA internal memo, November 3rd, 2015. "After reviewing the rule with our Office of General Counsel, it appears there are differing possible interpretations of the lead-copper rule with respect to how the rule's optimal corrosion control treatment processes apply to this situation, which may have led to some uncertainty with respect to the Flint water system," end quote. The law, something already passed out of this Congress, is the lead and copper rule is supposed to be updated every 6 years. We're now being told it won't be updated until 2018. 12 years after it was supposed to. And you will hear back and forth in the correspondence about concern from the state and the Department of Environment. What are they supposed to do? And this is the General Counsel, the Director of the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water saying, yeah, this continues to be a problem.
Mr. Kilsey, and I really appreciate you and Ms. Lawrence for all of your efforts for requesting this hearing and making it happen. And finally, I want to say a special thank you to the many residents of Flint, Michigan, who traveled all the way here to Washington, D.C. to attend today's hearing. And to you, we thank you. And Reverend Sharpton, I thank you for being here. I welcome you all, and I thank you so much. I believe that we have a moral obligation to conduct a comprehensive investigation of this crisis. And let's be abundantly clear, it is a crisis. We need to determine how children in the United States of America in the year of 2016 have been exposed to drinking water poisoned with lead. And not by accident, by the actions of their own government. I ask every member of this committee to take a moment and imagine what your reaction would be if this happened in your district instead of Flint. Ask yourselves, would I tolerate it? Of course you wouldn't. You would demand answers. You would demand that we examine the actions of everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. You would hear testimony from everyone involved, and you would obtain documents from everyone involved. The problem is that today we are missing the most critical witness of all, the governor of the state of Michigan, Rick Snyder. He is not here. Governor Snyder was the driving force behind Michigan's emergency manager law, which he signed in 2011 and invoked to take over the city of Flint from its local elected leaders. The governor handpicked appointees to run the city, and they decided to use water from the Flint River. They also led the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, which failed to protect the people of Flint, according to the governor's own task force charged with investigating this crisis. Obviously, Governor Snyder should have to answer for his decisions. We asked the chairman to invite him today, but he would not. We asked the chairman to give us a date in the future for a hearing with Governor Snyder, but he would not. We asked the chairman to send the same kind of document request to Governor Snyder that he sent to the EPA, but he would not do that either. We want answers from everybody, from the EPA straight on down to the local officials. That's the way we get to the bottom of this crisis. The problem with this approach is that it undermines the credibility of Congress, our committee, and this investigation. That is totally unacceptable to the people of Flint. It should be totally unacceptable to the people of this Congress, and totally unacceptable to the people of the United States of America. As I said before, we are the last line of defense. And certainly we want to hear from the EPA. I want to hear from the EPA. Based on what I've seen, the EPA officials should have moved much more aggressively after they detected their heightened levels of lead. But states are the primary enforcement agencies for the Safe Drinking Water Act, not the EPA. The chairman argues that we should let the state continue its own investigation, but I disagree. The state has failed the people of Flint. Now it's up to us, all of us. And let me be clear. If we act selectively for political reasons, then we become a part of the problem. The information has been brought to us, and we now have a duty to investigate all aspects of the crisis. We simply do not have the right to remain silent. We do not have the right not to act. Government broke it. Government must fix it. And so today, every Democrat on the committee has joined together to sign this letter to the chairman. It invokes our right under the House rules to demand a hearing with witnesses of our choosing. In this letter, we officially request testimony from Governor Snyder and the three key emergency managers that he appointed to govern Flint: Edward Kirsch, Jerry Ambrose, and Darnell Early. I ask that our letter be inserted into the official hearing record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
I ask that it be inserted into the official hearing record, and our ultimate goal must be to serve the interests of the children and the families of Flint. And so we do not know the full extent of the damage that was caused, but we know it is grave. Today, the committee received a letter from the American Academy of Pediatrics. The letter warned that thousands of children under the age of 6 have now been potentially exposed to lead through the Flint drinking water. The letter says this: As you know, the city of Flint has long been an impoverished community beset by a host of economic and infrastructure hardships. This adversity, coupled with widespread lead exposure, means that Flint's children will require significant help in coping with the impact of lead on their physical and behavioral health and development, their schooling, and much more. End of quote. As I close, Mr. Chairman, it is our job here on this committee and in this Congress to make sure this help is provided to these kids. But, Mr. Chairman, not only to the kids, but to the adults and every citizen of Flint, and to ensure that they are not forgotten after these hearings end. And that is why I say this is not a political issue. This is a moral issue. We have to investigate what happened at all levels, including the state, and then we have to turn to accountability and reform. Last but not least, Mr. Chairman, there's a fellow who had a song that I used to love. He never had any hits in my district, but he sang the song, he said, and his name was Cat Stevens. And Cat Stevens said, "Oh, very young, what will you bring us this time? You're only dancing on this earth for a short time. Oh, very young, what will you leave us this time?" And I've often said that our children are the living messages we send to a future we will never see. The question is what will they leave us? And how will we send them into that future? Will we send them strong? Will we send them hopeful? Will we rob them of their destiny? Will we rob them of their dreams? No, we will not do that.
Mr. Edwards has highlighted this as an ongoing still today in Flint, Michigan, who are waking up this morning. They can't drink the water, and they can't take a shower. They're using a bottle of water to drink, and they're using a bottle of water to take a shower. And I can't even imagine my family having to go through that here in the United States of America. I was able to visit Flint with a number of members here on this past Saturday, and this is a crisis, and it affects a lot of people. And I think these hearings have been very productive. There are people that have been exposed to drinking lead-laced water for more than a year. And this is, I believe, a failure at every level, and I think most everybody has acknowledged that. Let's remember that Flint City was a city in crisis. Financial situation was dire at best. The people of Michigan made a decision, and emergency managers were put into place, save dollars. And I think the idea, desire to reduce the rate of the cost of water, as well as improve the quality of water, was where this started, but it's not where it ended up. At every level in Michigan, from the city to the Department of Public Works to the emergency manager to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, there were failures. And there's questions about the accuracy of the data that was provided. Some of those people were responsible and reported to the governor of Michigan. And I appreciate the governor volunteering and suggesting that coming here and testifying before Congress to tell his version of the story was an appropriate thing. And Governor, I appreciate your willingness to come talk to this body, because there are some serious questions, and we do want to get to the bottom of it. The Congress also has responsibility and jurisdiction over the EPA. The funding of the EPA, obviously being a federal organization, we have jurisdiction, and it's proper and important that we look at things from that perspective as well. In February, Leanne Walters, who's here in the audience with us today, finally got fed up with what was going on, where she managed to get a hold of the EPA, and Miguel del Toro from the EPA showed up on the scene and started to test the water. He should be highly commended for his actions and the things that he did. And I appreciate Leanne Walters and her family for stepping forward, and can't even express, I just can't even imagine what her and her family and her son, who I met, got a picture with, what they've been through. By June, the EPA clearly knew that this was a crisis. They absolutely knew that this was a problem. And Susan Hedman, as the administrator for the Region 5, she definitively knew that there was a problem. The mayor at the time in Flint asked what had happened. Is the water safe to drink? He was told, don't pay no attention to the report that was written by the EPA, and actually went on local television and told people it was safe to drink the water. Move forward to September 24th. One of the more troubling things, I want to put up this graphic. This is an internal email within the EPA talking about Susan Hedman. Perhaps she, Susan Hedman, already knows this, but I'm not so sure Flint is the community we want to go out on a limb for. End quote. You can take that down. It's one of the more offensive, concerning things I've seen. That there were people, more than one, that were making decisions and thinking that, well, maybe Flint isn't who we should go out on a limb for. Are you kidding me? Of all the communities out there, Flint is the #1 place that they should have been going out on a limb for. It's depressed economically. They're going through their own economic crisis, and there's internal discussion at the EPA deciding whether or not we should go out on a limb for. Days later, the EPA administrator said Ms. Hedman's work was, quote, very encouraging, end quote. Gina McCarthy said, quote, they're making great progress. But it wasn't until January of 2016 that the EPA actually took definitive action. The day after that, Susan Hedman, the Region 5 administrator, resigns. Later asked about that action, Gina McCarthy, the EPA administrator, said that that resignation was courageous. Courageous. That's something we're going to talk about here. This isn't supposed to happen here. We're not some third world country where you get 100,000 people who get poisoned for long periods of time. I can't even begin to express, I don't know, how would my wife and I deal with our kids being poisoned for so long? I physically cannot even understand or comprehend what the parents and the loved ones and the individuals who've been drinking that water have been going through. And I'm disappointed in the response at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level. This is a failing at every level. It's absolutely fundamentally and totally wrong. The public has a right to be outraged. Outrage doesn't even begin to cover it. So I don't know how we fix this, but it has to be fixed. We're going to hear from one of our witnesses today. I chatted with her for a moment before, Ms. Walters. And I appreciate your coming before the committee and doing what you did early on in the process. I really do. And I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. We can't let this happen. It should have never happened in the first place.
And I am proud of this committee for holding this hearing. We will get to the bottom of this, and as Mr. Walberg said, we will do it in a bipartisan way.
I live in a neighborhood where lead is a problem. I'm very sensitive to this issue. Governor Snyder has been described as running the state of Michigan like a business. Well, what if this was a business? What if a CEO ran a company that sold toys laced with lead that children put in their mouths? What if those children were poisoned as a result? And what if that CEO ignored warnings for more than a year as those kids got sicker and sicker and sicker? There's no doubt in my mind that if a corporate CEO did what Governor Snyder's administration has done, he would be hauled up on criminal charges. The board of directors would throw him out, and the shareholders would revolt. This is similar to what is happening now to Governor Snyder. The special counsel for the state attorney general's office has launched an investigation. And he says, I didn't say this, he says, that state officials could face charges including breach of duty, gross negligence, or even manslaughter. Charges, he says, are, and I quote, not far-fetched, end of quote.
On our committee, we've obtained documents showing that people all around the governor, including his chief of staff, were sounding the alarms, but he either ignored them or didn't hear them. So we're talking about quotes. Let's talk about them. In October 2014, the governor's top legal advisor had warned that Flint should, and I quote, get back on the Detroit system as a stopgap as soon as possible before this thing is too far out of control. End of quote. That's the chief of staff. In March of 2015, the governor's own chief of staff, now that was his legal advisor, but his chief of staff said in March of 2015, if we procrastinate any longer in doing something direct, we'll have real trouble, end of quote. That's from the chief of staff. And in July, his chief of staff again warned that Flint residents, and I quote, are concerned, and rightfully so, about the lead level studies they are receiving. They are basically getting blown off by us, end of quote. The document reveals failures at every level, led by Governor Snyder's hand-picked appointees, and the governor's fingerprints are all over this. His Department of Environmental Quality, his Department of Health and Human Services, his inner circle of top aides, his press staff, and his chief of staff, and of course the emergency managers the governor put in charge of Flint. There will now be an entire generation of children who suffer from brain damage, learning disabilities, and many other horrible effects of lead poisoning that were inflicted on them by Governor Snyder's administration. There'll be many children, Mr. Chairman, who will sit in the second and third grade and will not be able to read the words "see spot run" and won't know why. But the reason why is because there's lead in their veins. Now, Republicans are desperately trying to blame everything on the EPA. So let me say this. I agree that the EPA should have done more. They should have rushed in sooner to rescue the people of Michigan from Governor Snyder's vindictive administration and his utter incompetence at every level. Governor Snyder's administration had primary responsibility for enforcement under the Safe Drinking Water Act, not the EPA. Governor Snyder's administration chose to switch to the Flint River for a source of water, not the EPA. Governor Snyder's administration ignored warnings from the Flint Water Treatment Plant supervisor not to go forward with the switch, not the EPA. Governor Snyder's administration falsely told the city of Flint that corrosion control was unnecessary, not the EPA. Governor Snyder's administration delayed corrosion control for months and harmed thousands of additional people in the process, not the EPA. Governor Snyder's administration overruled the Flint City Council's vote to return to clean Detroit water, not the EPA, as I close. So yes, I agree. The EPA should have snatched control out of Governor Snyder's hands even sooner than they did. But Governor Snyder's administration caused this horrific disaster and poisoned the children of Flint. On the governor's website, his motto is, and I quote, "Reinventing Michigan, getting it right, getting it done," end of quote. It's hard to imagine a more misleading slogan. It also says this, and I quote, "We will learn from this experience," end of quote. And so, as I said earlier in the other hearing, these children, when we're dead and gone, these children will suffer for what we failed to do. And so, Mr. Chairman, as I've said to you before, we have to be the last line of defense. We have to be it, because generations yet unborn will suffer. But we've got to do everything in our power to mitigate that. I look forward to the hearing, and I yield back.